Welcome to the Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. I'm so happy you found us. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-Fiber1 News Radio, KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9.
Hey, good Monday morning, and I hope you had a wonderful weekend. It looks like it's going to be nice, at least for the first couple days here. Good morning, Spencer. How are you?
Hey, good morning. Happy belated Father's Day there.
For sure. You the same. We'll get to some of our adventures here later this morning, though. Today in the news, big news as we wake up and find ourselves at Phase 3 here in Mason County. We'll find out what that means and how it's changed from Phase 2. Also, update on the COVID numbers for Mason County. Check the gas prices, and we'll get a report in from Eric Tegedoff.
And I'll check the weather for the week. It's going to be beautiful today. And a conversation in two parts with U.S. Congressman Derek Kilmer, who represents the 6th District here in Washington.
Well, Friday we heard the big news. The Department of Health for the state approved Mason County's Phase 3 application, and they start today. Let's see. Here is the difference. Recreation, outdoor groups of recreational sports activities now can be 50 or fewer people. Recreational facilities at less than 50% capacity, so a little bit more room there for folks to go to the gyms and stuff. Gatherings, allow gatherings no more 50 people is the limit there. Let's see, spiritual or religious services, indoor capacity at 50% or 400, whichever is less. Choirs are still not allowed. Health requirements for social distancing and facial covering will remain the same as the guidelines for the previous phases. Looks like you can resume non-essential travel. Businesses, restaurants, and taverns can be now less than 75% capacity. Table size, though, no larger than 10. Bar areas in restaurants and taverns at less than 25% capacity. Theaters at less than 50% capacity. Customer-facing government services, although telework is still strongly encouraged. Libraries, museums, and all other business activities are not yet listed, except for nightclubs and events with greater than 50 people. So that's what it looks like, the metric here for the most part. That's kind of what you have come to understand too, Spence, in this
Sure.
Phase 3. We're at about 50% of opening, and then you can imagine Phase 4 gets us. But Phase 4 is not going to happen for a while. Those are like massive sporting events and huge gatherings of people. I mean, that's going to be a while. But exciting for Phase 3, and seeing the restaurants and businesses in Mason County have done the best they can to weather this over the last 3 months or whatever. It's exciting to see this, but still not a time to put the pause on your own face coverings or comfortability assessments when you go into places. How are you doing with all that stuff?
Doing good. And just a quick observation. I'm glad you asked, because we went to a very nice experience at lunch dinner for Father's Day, and we couldn't believe that a group came in and they were giving the owners kind of a hard time because they were 10 or 11 of them, and they wanted to be in a long table, and they even wanted to be next to each other, back to back. And it's not the restaurant owners. They have no say in this. They're following the laws. These are the laws and the rules that we all have to live by. Don't try to strong-arm, a restaurant owner into letting you break the rules, for goodness sakes. I mean, it's almost the modern-day equivalent. It's the pandemic equivalent of, I'll be 21 years old in a month. Just let me buy the beer. I mean, no. I mean, they can lose their license. I mean, these places, if there's an inspector in there and sees 11 people at a table, they could shut these people down. So
you're exactly right, Spencer. It's not a 10 top coming in saying, "Hey, we'll give you a good tip" or something like that. A 10 top and a good tip is not worth your whole business, your livelihood, your family's future, and those employees that rely on you for a job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to acquiesce to somebody who may be a little vocal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cook yourself a meal at home and have 100 people over if you want in your own house, I guess, or whatever. Not 100, but you know what I mean. Just do what you want to do, but leave the businesses alone, I guess. But Mason County Public Health was notified June 21st of one additional Mason County resident that tested positive for COVID-19. This brings the total to 42 positive cases of COVID-19 in Mason County. Mason County Public Health is continuing contact interviews. The patient, a female in her 20s, is currently isolating at home. This is a direct contact of a previous positive case. Mason County Public Health also currently aware of an out-of-state case that was tested in Mason County, and this has caused a discrepancy in numbers, and they're working with Washington State DOH to rectify this.
Well, gas prices have risen near 2 cents in the last week. $2.59 is the average, according to Gas Buddy, and they check about 2,660 stations. Gas prices in the state, 22 cents per gallon higher than a month ago, but 70 cents per gallon lower than a year ago. Cheapest in the whole state, about $2. The national average is $2.12 today, and as people are starting to reopen more and more, we're seeing the heavier traffics up in Seattle and things like that. Congestion is starting to pick up again, which was down to record lows, obviously, at the start of all this.
No, absolutely. Police say one person has been wounded in the second shooting in Seattle's protest zone in less than 48 hours. The shooting happened late last night in the area near Seattle's downtown known as CHOP, for Capitol Hill Occupied protest. Police tweeted that one person was at a hospital with a gunshot wound. A hospital spokesperson says the person was in serious condition. A pre-dawn shooting Saturday had left a 19-year-old man dead and another person critically injured. No arrests in that shooting had been made as of yesterday. Further details weren't immediately available. The Senate is close to approving a bill that will support the outdoor places Washingtonians love visiting. Eric Tegedoff has more.
The Senate is close to approving a bill that will support the outdoor places Washingtonians love visiting. The Great American Outdoors Act would provide $6 billion over 5 years for maintenance on national parks and permanently fund the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Washington Senator Maria Cantwell is a longtime supporter of the LWCF, which is used to open access to public lands as well as for projects such as city parks and hiking trails. She says this bill ensures that money isn't siphoned off the fund, as in previous years.
Very excited about that because it will mean a bump in the amount of money that will help states and counties and cities access open space for the general public.
A full vote is likely to come next week. Funding in this bill comes from offshore oil and gas royalties. Sean Logan is mayor of the central Washington town of Othello. He says LWCF funding is critical for small rural communities that often can't afford to build parks and trails on their own. His town hopes to use funding from the program on a project called Pride Rock Park. Logan's vision for the park is to make the outdoors accessible for everyone, regardless of their economic status.
Even the poorest families can experience equity as they play and be a part of something special, something exciting, and at no cost. And when you come to Pride Rock Playground, you don't have to be rich. Everyone gets the same opportunity.
Alfonso Orozco is with the Nature Conservancy in Washington and a volunteer for Latino Outdoors. He says LWCF has been integral in getting more Latino Washingtonians out into nature. He says permanently funding the program will help make outdoor spaces more inclusive for everyone.
In Washington, people generally understand the benefits that nature can provide, and I think we need to do a much better job of making sure that nature and these outdoor spaces are available to the Latino community, but many other communities as well.
President Donald Trump has said he will sign this legislation into law if Congress passes it. For Washington News Service, I'm Eric Tegedoff.
Well, thank you, Eric. And tomorrow is a big day. It's Shelton High School's graduation. So be advised, traffic around Oakland Bay, the high school, Shelton Springs, Wallace Neyland, that whole area is going to be heavily congested tomorrow. Early, starting, I would say probably 8:30 or 9, you're going to start to see folks starting to get ready for this. The ceremony is at 10, but there's a lot of pre-planning that has to go into this. 1 car per family, per graduate. So that means it's going to be a real unique way to celebrate the Shelton High School graduation. Cars will be staged across the Shelton High School parking lot and OBJH as needed. They will be driving, and then they get out of the car and they kind of walk down a line, and then they'll head up, get their diplomas and their pictures. It's going to be it's going to be a top-notch graduation, considering the circumstances we're in. I'll be up there kind of behind the scenes getting comments from graduates and messages of how crazy this year has been and well wishes and hopes and dreams, stuff like that. So that'll be fun tomorrow throughout the morning and the afternoon. It's going to be a long day, too. I think they were thinking 4 o'clock could be the end of this thing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So a very long day to facilitate this graduation during coronavirus. So congratulations to the graduates. We're keeping our senior shout-outs for the next week, and then come July 1st, we're going to start explaining to you our new contest where we're going to give away a bunch of gift cards to the Strip Steakhouse, thanks to Eric Anisco, who picked up a whole bunch, got in touch with me and said, let's do a fun contest and let's help the Strip Steakhouse. So that'll be a lot of fun. More Daybreak Show is coming up here, and good morning to you.
From the iFiber One News Radio studios, you're listening to Daybreak.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Jeff Slakey here on the Daybreak Show, along with Spencer Hughes, and via Zoom video conference representing the 6th District here in the great state of Washington, Derek Kilmer. Morning, Derek. How are you doing?
Good morning. Great to be with you.
So it's been a busy last week in the halls of Congress and all across the country, of course, as lots of things have been going down. Let's start locally first. We saw that the Governor Inslee had put forth the note that there is a massive, and it was not unexpected, massive revenue shortfall, almost to the tune of 8.8, close to $9 billion or so. The furloughs are starting to come for state workers, and there have been some raises in the upper echelons of management across the state that are being held back. Talk to me a little bit about this. I mean, we saw it coming, and my question that we'll get to is basically, are the feds, is Congress nationally going to do anything to help out all of these states, which I can imagine all 50 of them are going to face this?
Yeah, both state and local governments are getting crushed right now. And that's in part because local families and local employers are getting crushed too. We've seen, as a consequence of this virus, the economy was put into sort of a medically induced coma. And even as we start to turn the dial on reopening, unfortunately, the economic projections are that we're going to see prolonged high unemployment, according to the Congressional Budget Office, not just double-digit unemployment through 2020, but through 2021 as well, unless the federal government takes further action. And part of the reason you see that prolonged expectation of high unemployment is not just the private sector job loss that we've seen from local employers shutting down. It's now the kind of second wave of this, as states and school districts and local governments and community colleges look at layoffs. So the House, to directly answer your question, the House has already passed a bill called the HEROES Act. And it's called the HEROES Act because if you think about who gets funded by state and local government, it's educators, it's at the local level, firefighters and hospital workers in our public hospital districts. And it's, in my view, really important to make sure that we don't see a massive job loss that could also lead to the erosion of services and turn what is a recession into either a prolonged recession or even a depression. So the HEROES Act provides assistance to state government, to local government, would help sort of backfill those lost revenues. So far, it has not gotten much traction in the United States Senate. Senator McConnell has said, well, we don't want to bail out states that were profligate spenders before this. I think it's important to acknowledge that's not what the HEROES Act does. The HEROES Act simply tries to make up for the losses caused by this virus. The state of Washington, to its credit, left Olympia this year with a $3 billion rainy day fund. But, the problem is it's not just raining, it's pouring.
Yeah.
And that's where the federal support, I think, is really important.
When you talk to congressional delegation in the House from Kentucky, are they having conversations with Senator McConnell about this? Because it does appear
that he's the leader of the Senate and he can bring forth the bills at his discretion. But there is such an impact in the rural communities in Washington, as I'm sure the rural communities in Kentucky. I mean, he has to be hearing from the House side of the delegation, whether or not they fully supported the HEROES Act or not. It feels like this legislation is something that needs to at least be discussed.
Yeah, I think you're starting to get Democrats and Republicans to appreciate the fact that in the absence of more federal action, you're going to see the types of cutbacks that the state is projecting. And part of our challenge at the state level is, 70% of what the state funds is protected in one way or another. It's, and the biggest chunk of that, thankfully, is K-12, which much of K-12 funding is constitutionally protected. Unfortunately, not all of it is. So you see communities in the district I represent where teachers are getting pink slipped right now. And, that's why I have a sense of urgency about this. In the absence of action by the Senate, what we're going to see is, Senator McConnell has said, well, let's just wait and see. But the problem is, our local school districts can't wait. And as you saw in the announcement from the governor this week, state government can't wait. And so you're seeing layoffs, you're seeing furloughs, you're seeing cutbacks. In the city of Tacoma, almost 3 weeks ago, they laid off more than 250 people. And that's 250 people now who won't have stable employment. And so there are real ramifications of that to our economy. You heard the chair of the Fed just this week say, Congress needs to take action on this. And that's not to your point, it's not a blue area thing or a red area thing. It's an everywhere thing. There's really the economic impacts of this don't discriminate by your party preference. And so I just think it's really important, particularly in rural communities where, the county and state government and the school districts are the largest employers. And I would also add to that our hospitals. And they're all really hurting right now. And so the HEROES Act both directs some assistance to state and local government, also provides some additional help to hospitals. I did a call last week with the leaders of the hospitals throughout our region. And without exception, they're really underwater right now. And they're asking for the Senate to take action. And frankly, they can't wait.
One of the things that rolls through the Senate is the confirmation of Supreme Court justices. And we saw not only two major pieces of decisions by them regarding LGBTQ, as well as the Dreamers Act and the DACA recipients. Do you have your response on both of those and the other issues that came from the court this last week? Yeah,
well, I'll speak to the two big cases that got the most attention. I think it was an important finding by the court that people can't be discriminated against based on who they are or who they love, and saying that in matters of employment, someone can't be fired because of their sexual orientation and their gender identity. I think that's actually really important. Now, that court decision is important. Having said that, there's legislation that has passed the House, also waiting for action in the Senate, called the Equality Act, that goes beyond just employment discrimination, but also looks at things like housing and credit and things that, thankfully, in the state of Washington, with bipartisan support, the state of Washington provided those protections in our state's civil rights laws. But that's not the law of the land throughout our country, and that's why I think the Equality Act is still important, even though the Supreme Court found that there should be protections in matters of employment. I think that there's still value in passing the Equality Act. The other decision related to the DACA program, which is focused on young people who came here through no choice of their own, through no fault of their own, and are really Americans in every way except on paper. And the DACA program was set up to basically provide them with the ability to continue to live here without fear of deportation. They had to meet these young people had to meet certain requirements for that to happen. And unfortunately, early in his tenure, President Trump pulled the plug on that program. And I will tell you, I have regularly met with DACA recipients who are also called Dreamers. And, one, they have some amazing stories. And two, it's heartbreaking to hear them say, I met with a group of young people in Tacoma on Martin Luther King Day. And one said, I came here as a little kid. I was a toddler. And, if the government wants to deport me, where do they want to send me? Because I don't know anybody anyplace else. And so that's a fear that has been over the shoulder of a lot of these young people. And so the Supreme Court decision, I think, was important to lift that cloud and lift that threat. Again, though, I think this is an example of an area where Congress can take action too. Again, you saw the House pass last year a bill called the Dream and Promise Act, which would make that just the law of the land, so that young people who are brought here through no choice of their own, through no fault of their own, who meet the requirements under the DACA program, would be able to both stay without threat of deportation and could be put on a pathway to permanent legal status and to citizenship. And that got bipartisan support in the House. Again, an example of something that's waiting for action in the Senate. And again, I hope that we can see that become law, so that this is just the permanent law of the land.
It seems that it helps the case if pieces of legislation are brought up simultaneously in both chambers. There's been a lot of movement in policing. I know you have the Policing Act that you are working on in the House. We've seen some work on that too on the Senate side. Senator Scott on the Republican side has been in the forefront of the GOP there, putting forth their ideas. Senators Booker and Harris also have another plan that they're working on. How have you taken to all the peaceful protests and the different marches and things and the movement that we've seen quickly, at least with cities and states? And then let's go to what you've been working on.
Yeah. What's interesting, one of the experiences I've had over just the last week or two was on a call with some of my colleagues, and we were joined by my colleague John Lewis, who is a civil rights icon. We haven't heard from him in a bit because unfortunately he's battling cancer. And he came onto the call and he said, in one sense, that he'd been crying a lot lately. He said, it's really hard to see when you see what happened to George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, to Breonna Taylor, to Ahmaud Arbery. He said it's just such a stark reminder that we're not as far along the path to justice as anyone in our country wants us to be. And, he knows from what he speaks, right? This is a man who was beaten and tear gassed on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, simply for advocating for his right to vote and the rights of African Americans in the South to be able, and around the country, to be able to exercise their voting rights. And he said, so I've been very sad lately. But the next thing he said was, but I'm also hopeful because we've seen people stand up and speak out and peacefully protest and demand change and demand action. And that's important. And that's why I think you're seeing action in Congress far later than it should have happened. But you're seeing discussions in the House and in the Senate, to your point. I joined with the Congressional Black Caucus in introducing a bill called the Justice and Policing Act, which really focuses on reforming our system to ensure those really important words of liberty and justice for all. Among the things that it focuses are things like combating racial profiling, ending things like the use of chokeholds and no-knock warrants in drug cases, trying to at least limit some of the transfer of military equipment to local police departments. I think, if you're talking about a Kevlar vest or something like that seems all right. When you've seen, MRAPs being used against peaceful protesters in some parts of the country, not okay. Some of it's focused on trying to ensure that officers who commit wrongful conduct, that they're held accountable. And among the steps in that is also establishing a national police misconduct registry. So if someone commits wrongful conduct, they can't just hop from one department to another, that there would be at least knowledge of the department that's doing the hiring. And I've done a lot of outreach to the Black community throughout the district I represent, and heard from young people and heard from older people about the real challenges that they have faced, not just in policing, but other systemic injustices and issues of housing and education and healthcare and criminal justice. And, frankly, that requires the attention of Congress too. And I'm hopeful that we can, and I'm working to address those issues as well.
One final thing, as schools all across the state and the district are wrapping up, I got to know how we know all the great work that Representative Congressman Kilmer is doing. How is Teacher Kilmer doing during all this?
Well, both of my folks were school teachers, and I always, anytime my dad said, "Do you ever think you'd want to go into education?" I always said, "I'm not sure I have the patience for it." And I think the last 3 months proved it. We officially had a fifth grade graduation yesterday, and the day before that we had an eighth grade graduation. So we made it through, and I'm proud of my kiddos, and frankly, I'm proud of all the kiddos out there. This has been a really challenging time, and obviously a strain on families and on our kids. And I'm going to be speaking next week with the head of our superintendent of public instruction to talk about, okay, what does reopening look like next fall, and how can the federal government make sure that happens? That's both in the interest of all of our kids and the fact that I'm not the greatest teacher.
Right. It has been an interesting conversation with the North Mason School District and the Shelton School District on their initial conversations of reopening and how that will look. And yeah, the kids have really stepped up, and I know that my son it's been hard for a kindergartner he'll be going into first grade next year, and these Zoom classes, after about the 30-minute mark, you start to lose focus, as I'm sure everybody does.
Yeah, no, I think I used to complain about my kids spending too much time in front of screens, and then when the schooling has to happen in front of screens,
right?
It's like, well, I do feel for our kids, and at least from what I've seen from them and from some of their buddies in school, I think they're stepping up big time, and I'm really proud of them.
U.S. Congressman Derek Kilmer, proudly and great representative of the 6th District here in the great state of Washington. Always good to catch up with you. And when you've got more great bills and legislation you're working on, co-sponsoring, let me know. We'll get you on and talk about it.
You bet. Thanks. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much for listening to today's Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. Again, I'm so happy and honored you found us and chose to listen. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of some of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-501 News Radio KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Thank you so much again, and talk with you next time.